Now I'd like to introduce you to Jenny Downing. Jenny's got 2 SWAN children, aged 18 and 15, and an older child who's 20. Jenny's got other family members who also need some extra support, although they're not under the special needs umbrella or supported by NDIS. Jenny juggles caring with part-time work, part-time study, running a house, and trying to take care of herself. Isn't that a familiar tale? Anyway, over to Jenny to talk to us about her experience with day programs, and she'll join us for some question and answer time at the end of her session.
Hi everyone, my name's Jenny Downing and I'm going to be talking about post-school transition and part of the SWAN Transition Conference. Hi, this is my SWAN children. There's me on the right, and on the left is my son Jeremy, who's 18, almost 19 years old now, and in the middle is my daughter Claudia, who's 15 and still at school, while Jeremy finished school at the end of last year. I also have an older son who's 20, who's studying at university at the moment. Well, transition needs a point to start from, so that's some kind of school. So this is Jeremy at school. My son Jeremy went to, and Claudia still goes to a special developmental school. So in Victoria, these are schools that are designed for children who have an IQ of below 50. Yeah, there are other schools, and you know what your family or your child situation is, but that could be homeschooled, mainstream school, or a specialist school of some sort. And of course, it also depends on your child's attitude to school. Jeremy loves school. He's the big fish in the little pond. There weren't that many kids in his age cohort, and some of those kids were actually in other campuses. So he kind of ruled the roost a little bit there, and we'll see that actually panned out not so great during transition. But each to their personality. I know some kids, they get to, they're ready to leave a lot earlier than 18, but Jeremy stayed until 18 because he loved it. His biggest love was actually not so much the school, but the school bus. So yes. So you need to have your starting point. So once you're clear on your starting point, you need to start thinking about the actual transition process. So firstly, will your teenager be involved in that transition process? For some teenagers, they're able to take part in that, but not all teenagers have the cognitive ability to do so. But either way, you should be able to think about what's important to your teenager, whether they can contribute or not. I think you've got a fairly good idea as parents. And these are the sort of things that maybe then you keep in mind for adding into their post-school life. What are their aspirations, particularly around work, living independently, school or further studies? Pull out the crystal ball and see if you can work out what maybe some of those aspirations might be. You may not meet those end goals, but they give you a goals to aim for. So trying to view what your child's life might look like in the future might help you in getting to those aspirations. And the point here is to start early. I know with my eldest son, we were having discussions about careers by the end of year 9 because that was brought on because they have to start choosing subjects and making decisions about subject choice, which then ultimately leads to discussions about where they might end up going in the end. Now, with that said, that's not what we did. You can see in this photo here, this is Jeremy's 13th birthday. He was actually a sick little boy. He's on chemotherapy at this point because that's why his face is all puffy on all the prednisolone, and his hair's starting to fall out. So we didn't plan anything because we were just really focused on his health. He was on chemotherapy until he was 15. So there was a lot of dramas with that. But once he'd even finished chemotherapy and he was in remission, there was still a lot of getting his medications right. So we still had a lot of time trying to balance and get his health on track. He's actually pretty good at the moment. The other thing is that we also had an older boy who was going through VCE, and we actually spent a bit of time and gave him a bit of attention too. And this is something that I think gets overlooked by all sorts of agencies time and time again, is that these SWAN kids and kids with disabilities are members of families, and sometimes other people in the family need to take precedence. And so we decided that we'd spend the time and energies on our eldest son. Well, given that we'd spent quite a lot of time running around after Jeremy and while he was in chemo, that's just the compromise that you make with families. So we didn't start. We were just happy that he was healthy and well. So he's certainly not able to take part of that discussion, and there are certainly some things that are important to him as a teenager, but the future and the aspirations we hadn't even had a look at. So, but that's okay. You don't have to start right. You don't have to start right away. It's an evolving process. Just like when you left school, if you remember that question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then you leave school and you realize, I still don't know. There's no magical answer just when school is finished that you're going to find your way. It's about creating a life and exploring opportunities. It's really what early adult life is about. So you don't have to get it right straight away. So this is my young man Jeremy leaving school. This is his graduation. He left school last year. They were able to have a graduation in the gardens under strict COVID rules. All the families were under different marquees and so forth. So, but we managed to actually have a graduation, which was great. Now your child has left school, or you're looking at your post-school options. There are two sort of buckets that I like to think of these options, and I'm still mostly doing the first one. So that is filling in the gaps. So that's getting services on board and getting things on board that were provided by the school that Jeremy needs. So for Jeremy's case, that includes therapists and getting those on board, because the school provided all of those. We didn't have any outside therapists because it was just too exhausting to go through their programs as well. So we're doing those, but I'm only doing one therapist at a time. So we've got a physio on board and doing physio programs, but we haven't done anything on speech and we haven't done anything on OT. And that'll be later in the year when I can cope with doing more than one program at a time. So that's the other thing. Don't try and don't do too much too early. The other gap for Jeremy is hanging out with young people, because he can hang around the house with us or the carer he has at home, but we're all middle-aged and 18-year-olds are not. It's not really the thing. So we've opted for a day program, and at the moment he's going there 3 days a week. Hopefully soon to be 4 days a week, so he can hang around with young people there. And I'll talk about our experience with day programs in the next slide. Once you kind of get yourself established and you've got those all of their needs met, then you actually have to then start thinking about creating an adult life. And this is something that we're only just starting on. So that could include all sorts of things, and I'll talk about those in the next slide. So for moving on and creating an adult lifestyle, I sort of chunk them into 3 sections, mostly because I think about my eldest son and the things that are important to him, and in a sense he's my guide for the other two. So he's focused on lifestyle, education and employment, and the things that we need to consider for our SWAN children as well. So with lifestyle, it might be their hobbies or their interests, it might be sporting activities, what have you. So we probably have a fairly good idea of what our child is interested in or might be interested in. Social activities are pretty high on a teenager's interests, and also they might be starting to think about living arrangements or more adult living arrangements. Now, your SWAN child may not be at that point, but you may actually be preparing them for that, so that you may be teaching them how to do domestic chores and what have you. And certainly the one for my eldest, my big boy, is money and finance, and it might be something too that you might be considering discussing with your team. If you don't discuss it with your teen, or your teen's not able to understand, then you may need to actually have some administrative control over that money. And I know certainly SWAN ran a session on that a couple of weeks ago, but that might be something you need to start thinking about too. Further education may be an option for your SWAN child. Certainly I know that in Victoria's TAFE colleges often run living skill classes and courses that may be suitable, or there may be some other educational opportunity that may be suitable for your SWAN child, depending on their level of ability. Certainly not the case for Jeremy, but some children might. You might be considering employment for your teenager. So this might include volunteering or some sort of supported employment. We might know them more as sheltered workshops, although they've moved on from those nowadays. It might be a small business, a micro business, and there's certainly some NDIS funding for that. So if your child has just left school, they might be able to access the what's called the SLES, the School Leavers Employment service. But they can also later on in life access funding, not through SLES, but other funding to transition into the workplace. So that would include helping with the workplace and support workers and all sorts of things, depending on your teenager's needs. So I've just got a link of one that would happen to be on the news when I saw lately, but there's loads of them on the internet. So if you're you can look through those up and see if there's one that might be similar to your child's needs. Things I didn't expect. So all right, so I wasn't really paying a lot of attention, as I said, through Jeremy's teenage years, but the first one is that your child will no longer be a child. So probably starting at 16, it might be earlier, it might be later, you actually have to start thinking about like guardianship and administration and all of those sorts of things, who's making decisions and all of those things. And this is going to happen at the same time as leaving school. They may also be eligible for a pension when they're 16 as well. So try and get those things out of the way if you can, so that you're not trying to do two jobs at once. And again, this is another start early process if you can, and try and at least get ahead in some of those. Some of the other things were that not every service will accept you. I guess coming from a school system where, well, they kind of have to take you. We found there was one service that we were really interested in, but they said, no, his medical needs are too high, we're not interested. So they can pick and choose. And so be prepared for that sort of thing. And so have a few lined up. Not all of them are suitable. That's no surprise if we've been through the school system. There are some schools that suit better than others, and the same with services. So there was another service, that day centre, that we tried to get into. They accepted us. They were a hell of a lot closer than the current one. The current one's 20k drive from my home. This one was about half that distance and very close to his school, but it wasn't suitable. He just basically marched us out the door at lunchtime and said, no, I'm not staying here. And one of the other reasons is that they had a much older cohort. And this is where something that I was a little bit surprised about, and one of those things that I was really asking about was that because I wanted him for social skills, I wanted him to be hanging around young people and not old people. But as they said, look, we've got a 92-year-old who comes here, and there's no guarantee he's not going to be in a group with a 92-year-old. Now, I test run that by my 20-year-old, and he rolled his eyes. So I thought, okay, all right, that's not suitable. So if you're looking for a service or a group, try and get one that's got young people if that's important to you. And so I was ringing around a lot of them and going, what's your sort of average age? And some of them said, we've got one person who's 27, but all the others are in their 50s. No. So keep that in mind. So not everyone will be suitable. Transition takes time. It takes a number of years. And when you think about your own transition or transition of maybe adult or near adult children, it takes a while to get the hang of adulthood and get things right. And it's the same with our swan children. And feel free to make mistakes, because finding out what doesn't suit is as important as finding out what does suit. So don't beat yourself up about that one. So I think it'll be time for questions. Live, not recorded. So I'll see you in real time.
Well, thanks, Jenny, for your presentation on your family's journey. And I was really interested in the comparison of the young men in your life and your family. And yeah, great to hold the older brother up as the sort of the role model, and the things that and expectations and hopes and dreams you have for your other sons. So it's wonderful. Yeah, so yeah, really thinking about post-school options, and we're certainly in the midst at the moment of lots of different options that families are considering and can think about. And I think it's great for those families who've got younger children, so that they can start thinking really early and planning those choices and supporting their children to make those choices where they can. Do we have any questions in chat, Heather?
No, we don't at this stage, but I know Jenny's happy to answer questions after the presentation, and sometimes, you know, we think about things afterwards. So please email them to myself and I can forward them on to Jenny.